series.
Oh, did I just crash a party or something?
Yeah, go
Well, we
away.
were just talking. No big
Hello,
deal.
everyone.
We were just chatting. No big deal.
Yeah, Frode, I'm on the Apple site, and as you know, it's you
Yeah,
got to do all these
you're
tests.
absolutely right. And I just have to remember how I managed to get around it. So then we'll see. Dini, the issue is good old Adam. And if we don't get a positive reply from Sloan by Thursday evening, I'm going to just order one on Friday and then figure out how to pay for it later. So I've been texting with Rob to have a delivery there. But Rob, you're right. It probably means Adam has to order it and use you as a delivery address. I think that's what I did. I used Dini as a delivery address. So it's
Yes, and then I
delivered in
shipped
the
it to
US, no
you.
account in the. Sorry, Dini?
And then I shipped it to you, and it's about $250 to insure it and ship it.
Yeah, no, that's not exactly a small thing, exactly. So yeah. Anyway, we'll see about that as we get closer to the time. But it is a bit strange that they've been, what, 2 months now we've been waiting for a Sloan on this?
Yeah, but they probably don't get a lot of these kind of requests, and they're not moving very quickly. But I'll tickle the development people or the grant people one more time to see if we can get them to do something, because we have 2 people that need it now, right? We're going to be doing that for 2 people or 1 person? 1 person in payments, or how's it going to work?
One person this and one person that, exactly. So it'll be different. So that's interesting. Now, there are a few things. Okay, a few things. You've all been emailed what I've worked so medium, not very hard on, but medium hard on, the AI kind of summary. Have you had a chance to look at it briefly? Because
Can I mention that we probably want to do, what is this? Is this an internal document? Or are we going to publish this?
it's an internal document for now, absolutely. So the thinking is that at a certain point we edit it and we release it. But I'm extremely impressed with it, except it gets a few things wrong, like Fabien's last name, it misses an E with great consistency. Just a few things like that. So what I was hoping we could do going forward is I would produce one after every meeting and then email to everybody. And if there's something you believe does not reflect you, tell me and I'll just edit it. We don't have to have it AI pure, obviously. It just seems so much more readable than to go through the huge transcripts. And now I am doing every meeting transcribed and put on without access to other people on our website. So that's exciting. Hello, Andrew. Okay, I'm just going to show you something that very relevant to you, Andrew, particularly. I don't think we are full here. I think at least Fabienne will join us, but please have a look at the invitation and just look at the image on there. I've updated it a bit. So you all see the little logo thing is the little gray thing is supposed to be our gray sphere, kind of snuck in there. Hello, Mr. Fabienne and Mr. Peter.
I have a very shallow, like faint cyan light in the environment. I could try swapping that to orange to match the logo here. It's really subtle though, it doesn't do much.
What do you think, Dini?
We teach consistency of design in the program. So whatever you tell us the color should be, we'll embed it into the environment. So that's going to be our color palette. So normally we start with the mood board, then we develop a color palette, then we develop the typography, then we execute the design. So we haven't done any design work in this environment yet. So we're just waiting. But if this is going to be the color palette and the typography, then we will move that direction.
So the thing is, I just put a link into our future text publishing for volume 5. And all I did was just start with what was on the future text website with the orange and the gray.
Yeah.
And then the addition of that little sphere. It would be easy to over-design this, but we certainly don't want it to look either shoddy or irrelevant. So our pitch about how the boundary of knowledge and the boundary of knowing more about what we don't know fits with the sphere. So that's why I thought the sphere in Andrews, the sphere on the website kind of connects.
Seems to me if that's going to be I mean, I love the philosophical framework you're putting forward. But if that's the case, then maybe we should have, instead of the definite boundary around that final orange circle, it should be kind of pixelated out so it expands. I mean, if we're arguing that there's not a confined notion of knowledge, that we're trying to push whatever boundaries that are there are arbitrary, right? And part of what our job is to do is to go beyond what is current knowledge. Then there is no finite boundary. So that final little edge could be pixelating out.
Yeah. Okay. I'll look at that as well.
One thing that I find interesting here, I'm not sure if this was intentional, Fred, but the sphere, it like exactly has those two layers, just because of like the necessity of the mechanics. So when you tap and hold, the outer one expands around you and the other one stays there. So it very much fits with what we have. Symbolically, I don't know what that means because that was just a necessary mechanic, so you had an obvious button. But yeah, it does fit.
No, sorry. The line is a bit weird. I've interrupted both you and Dini. Sorry, please continue.
It actually didn't sound like you interrupted on my end. I was finished.
Oh, okay. Yeah, it is on purpose. I've gone through a few today. And the whole double circle made the most sense.
If I have some extra time after implementing the sort of primary reading distance thing, the focus this week, I could try to put some of those orange lines into the environment just to see what they look like. Could be kind of interesting to see, just like inside the library when it opens up, not anywhere else.
Yeah, Peter
I
wrote
wouldn't
in here,
spend too
XR
long on
app
it, so we
should-
could.
Sorry, I'm
toss it.
sorry, I thought you were through.
Sorry, Deanie.
Little lag. Peter's comment, the XR app should match the color scheme of the book cover art. So I think everything should coalesce into one schema.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
I think we've always known that we wanted a splash of color somewhere, but we didn't know what that color was. We can just go with orange. Before I had been doing slightly the off blue just because the website color was that, but I do quite like the orange.
Do you guys know where the fruit orange comes from? You know, obviously the word orange comes from the fruit, which is cool. The fruit actually comes from China.
Yeah.
I find that so weird. You know, Chinese restaurants at the end, often you get pieces of orange. I just thought that was silly, but that's so weird. Okay, the world is weird. Right, so there are a few, I know we're all over the place today, and Fabian is going to do a demo today. I think that'll be a really good chunk of time for us to spend on. But I wanted to go through a little bit of our, sorry, I'm just looking things up here, our case study. I just uploaded a huge document that I don't expect anyone to have a chance to read, but I'm going to share one single slide, not even a slideshow. and that is this. So the top bit is currently how reader provision works. When you tap on the screen, you get options on the top. So this is really important to take the pulse of where we are. I feel that an external piece of software should be able to add a sphere, literally our sphere. The example here has it at the bottom. If you tap that, the following should happen, and it should happen in the use case, the first use case, which is preparing to write an academic document, doing a bit of literature review. So it takes this, opens a web browser, goes to the web page for this, where we then have the sphere that Andrew has built. So the sphere is the continuity, right? Rather than just a button. And here's the key thing that we need to discuss and see if we agree on. What should be transmitted should, first of all, very important context. For the initial use case, the documents are from ACM. Our users are ACM Hypertext. That's our community. ACM currently has all the documents available as PDF and HTML. So what I think we should do, because we don't want to be too crazy, is you click on that dot, and what is uploaded or presented in the full XR experience is this document as built from HTML, but rendered in a familiar way. So at least initially it looks like it's plain text on a white background, so it doesn't look too crazy. But that should then allow us to relatively easily have multiple views, such as one screen per section and all of that good stuff. What's the feeling of that part? That's the first half.
Well, that sounds like what we've been talking about.
Yeah, no, exactly. That's my feeling. So then the second half is the entire library of the user, at least the metadata for the library, should also go up. So when going through a document and getting to the reference section and all of that stuff, they should instantly be able to follow links if they are in the user's library. So if we all agree on this basic mechanism, then we have two questions. One is how to upload the data. And I'm so glad we have both Fabienne and Leon here. And the second one is, I really think we can start doing design work for how reading should be, because Dini has a wish, being our prime academic user, of having 360, which is fine. But there are so many real world considerations. One of them is that when you sit at a desk and you're suddenly in a 360 environment, you may reach out and hit your computer that's on the screen. These are realities that we need to consider so that we can deliver on this, because we all agree once you're in XR, it should be a 360 swivel environment, right? Not necessarily for the entire time. I say, Fabienne, if you want to do forward facing and put things to the side, you should also be able to work in that mode, but you shouldn't be restricted so 360 is not feasible. Yeah, Dini.
Let's imagine it this way. I mean, I'm not going to be reading like this. That's not how we read, right? But we should be able to put things all around us. So if the 360 environment is like a virtual desk, so that everything can be placed where we want. I don't have enough space on 2 desks right now. If I had 3 more desks, I still wouldn't have enough space. So if we think about that space as more of a place where we can put things and move things, and I can read over here for a while, and maybe I can read over here for a while. Maybe I put something over here, move it over here, and know that, Frode, one of the reasons why I didn't want to Zoom off this computer was because this desk is a standing desk. It goes up and down. And by the 7th damn Zoom meeting before noon, I want to stand, right? So if I'm Zooming all day, I have to sit right here and look at it. Whereas on this computer, I can go up and down, which is great. So now I'm Zooming on 2 places, so I can at least stand some of the day. Our meetings, I'm sitting, but after that, I'm standing most of the day.
Yeah, that's really, really important. And flying to Asia and back, I spent a good couple of hours on the headset to be in that cramped position. And my God, it really changed the whole dynamic of being there, sitting with someone's seat inches from my face, but you know, I'm in the forest. It all works. However, the issue of where things are is so important. And that's why I'm looking forward to Fabian presenting in a few minutes, because like in soft space, there's this really cool thing. You make a fist motion and then you move the entire environment. So one of the things we could have here is you do a certain gesture and you move the entire environment around. So now that's your front, right? So you're reading this bit and you're reading this bit. And the notion of having a focus area is obviously really important. So on our future text lab page, where we have the research questions / use cases, I've taken what Dini put in Slack and what some of you have also put into user stories, which is something that we should keep refining. Yeah, Fabian.
So I haven't tried it, but as I hear you two talk, I'm thinking that one way that might work is, yes, you have, I mean, just for the context, on my desk, I have just one screen. I know that as a computer professional, that makes me look dumb, but like theoretically, the more screens you have, the smarter you look like, at least in movies, but I stick to one screen because I think ergonomically speaking, it is better. Yet I have a bunch of physical papers and notes on the side and even physical post-its around on my desk. So there are different areas, physical areas with different properties and different capabilities. And what I think is most of the time, indeed, like the full focus is on my one single screen to either read or code or both. And the rest is annex. And usually I turn on my chair for a minute and then I turn back. So how I would imagine that in XR is, for example, I pinch the environment, I flip or I turn it as a cylinder around me, and when I release, then it snaps back where it was. So basically, you have the main position where you're at, and then you, just like an elastic, basically, it goes back to the main default position.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. And on that, I think that's exactly, Dini, that's exactly what you're talking about as well, right? Oh, she's off. That's fine. Just wanted to show you this. This is a mock-up screenshot of how I'm going to change reader, because I had all these different views, and even me, the designer, I kept forgetting them. So the reason I'm showing you this is it's an interaction in one spot, but it is about changing what that one spot presents, which is really useful, I think. So the new way it's going to be in Reader, whether it's iOS, Vision. Yeah, so Dini, Fabian was just talking, actually, do you mind repeating the last bit, Fabian?
Yeah, I was imagining that you would be able to change the working area by pinching and holding, for example, but then on release, it snaps back, or like an elastic, it goes back to the default position, which is facing you when you started.
I think that's genius and useful and important. Vision does not do that. And that's why it's really neat when I demo to people, you can put things everywhere, but they're not really accessible. So that's important. So Dini, the little screenshot here of a mock-up is of relevance, because currently I have all kinds of keyboard shortcuts for views in Reader, but even me as a designer forget what they are. So what this is, when you fold a document, and this is based on most of the views in Reader being based on having the headings available, because they help you orient where you are, right? So now at the bottom of the screen, you can do outline, or an outline showing the highlights or names, glossary, blah, blah, blah. Not a huge point, but it's just what I found recently with the headset. Yes, it's nice to move around, but sometimes I just want to change what's in front of me really interactively. Right, so.
May I ask how hard that will be all to implement, Andrew?
I mean, it sounds like it's something that's fairly down the line. So I'm not sure. Just having it like return to a starting position, I may be missing something, but I don't really see the value in that. Since you could already just move stuff wherever you want it.
So imagine this, you're reading something and you're really engrossed in it, but because we're doing HTML rendered beautiful documents, it's going to be not the whole thing, but you're focused on that. And then you want to go something else. And let's say for the sake of this, you've chosen a layout, which is every chapter heading is a virtual page. So, it's kind of huge. So at a
Right.
certain point, you may want to go over and look at this bit, stay there. But then instead of having to kind of finesse your way back, you have kind of a home button, so to speak.
Right, having a button makes sense. But having to like pinch and keep it pinched the whole time, and as soon as you let go of the pinch, it returns back. Mechanically, it sounds really cool, but when reading a document, that seems like it would get annoying, especially since the headset occasionally loses tracking and it makes you release even if you don't. So you're going to be reading in place and it's going to just fly back to the start. Having like a dedicated button, like, or maybe add it to the menu or something would make sense. I don't know. Like just moving stuff around isn't that hard. I could just save a location and have it return to that point. Um, yeah, so in theory, it shouldn't be that difficult. Just don't know the practicality of the current idea.
Okay.
But
So then, thank you. Okay, you want to say hi real quick? No, it's just first day of school. So then the question, I really want, because we've gone through this in different ways so many times, to be able for the button in my software representing an external developer to send a URL with stuff to the WebXR stuff that includes the whole document. I believe Leon and Fabian have been looking into this lately. Have you had a chance to see what they have been thinking about, or do you guys want to talk about it? Or
You mean the
let's get
document
into-
about reading and references and all of that?
No, I'm talking about being able to upload from one place to WebXR.
I'm trying to keep up with all the documents. So we have the one that, this one you just showed, we have the one about the reading and references. And what's the third one?
No, what I mean is, sorry, I just took a peanut. What I mean is, you, the user, you're reading a PDF, and you click a button, and now that document is in WebXR. So we're talking about the mechanism. We've gone through this many times, so I think we should just nail down something. The mechanism through which that button sends it to the environment. I saw that Leon and Fabian had posted some things about Slack. Do you guys want to maybe mention what that is?
Yeah, we can. Can you hear me in the first to start?
Go
Okay,
for Leon.
that's a great start. So, well, there are various experiments, so I will just choose the one which is, the freshest in my mind. I think regarding bringing in documents into WebXR, there are various levels. For example, bringing a document into the library, bringing a document into, a spatial version from the library into your immersive environment, or bringing a document from somebody else's library, or viewing a document based on a link. So there's various entry points for bringing a document into XR space. What I was talking about with Fabien lately was based on an experiment where we basically had two web browser tabs open, and where we could basically send data from one tab to another tab. So in theory, you can have two WebXR experiences if you have two browser tabs, and you could have one tab connected to Frode's library, and maybe another tab connected to Andrew's library. And then through this code snippet, you could basically send a document from one tab to another tab, basically copying it to somebody else's library. Was about, and surprisingly, it was not, it was not very difficult. It was actually very easy. since every browser tab has a little bit of storage, and that can be shared across tabs, and that's how we could basically the other tab could sense when something was put into this tab storage and could basically pull it out then. So that was basically the experiment we did, and we wrote that into the chat. Just, maybe it's useful, maybe not, but yeah.
If I could respond a little bit, first of all, I think it's a very clever solution. That's pretty cool. And I'm sure we can find some use for it for sure. Now, my understanding of local storage, 'cause I worked with it a little bit, but not nearly as much as you guys have here. I believe that only works for browser tabs that are running in the same browser. So you can't be like across different browser types, things like that. And we want to go specifically from Reader as our use case, which is a standalone application. And I don't believe that even talks to local storage at all. Do you know if there's a way to still use this to kind of almost hijack the browser behavior and save stuff to local storage using Reader and then access that from a tab? Or for that case, should we look for a different route?
Yeah, it's correct what you're saying. I think if you want to bring in something really from the outside, it's either going to be some kind of networking solution, which is more complex, or it's going to be the copy-paste escape hatch, basically, or maybe even a combination of that with some simple networking functionality.
Okay. Sorry, Frode, do you mind if I respond before yeah, that makes sense. That's more in line with what I was thinking. I know in the past, kind of earlier stages of these meetings, Frode mentioned that it wasn't difficult to set up like a little upload using Reader to just like put it onto a dedicated server and then just store the information there. Is that still something that we could potentially do to have Reader upload the document with the visual meta talking about where it should go in XR onto a dedicated server on your server somewhere, and then just link to that with the same button?
So from my side, I like the experts answer that properly, but I'm willing to invest some more in Reader to support this. However, even though at some point we want any developer to be able to integrate, I don't want to slow things down. So if we decide, and now I'm looking at you, Dini, because this is really your call, because you have a much better understanding of this side of it. If yes, Zoom, sorry, buttons. If it is significantly easier for the end users to drag a document to a specific web browser tab and then have it available in XR, we should probably do that. It's taken many, many months of many different discussions to have a more elegant solution. But at a certain point, our main thing, our promise to Sloan, is that it's the user's own data. We can maybe make it more elegant over time. Peter, and then Brandel, if you have perspectives on this, please.
Okay, another possible means of integration would be to rely on a file watcher so that each process could be writing to a known location on disk, and each process could also be monitoring the sync file at that location so that a file change made by someone else on that file would be detected. Then you pull in the most recent version. So basically, you sort of like have an auto sync of the latest change of the file on disk. And if you become newer than the file on disk, you write out to that file. Then anyone else watching that file would see its timestamp jump and would be able to pull the data in that way. So it's sort of a way of avoiding network communication, relying on the disk file storage mechanism substrate instead.
Yeah, that makes sense to me, but I'm going to give it over to Brandel.
If the question is whether a web-based experience on a headset has the ability to see any changes on another non-server computer, be it the user's laptop or anything else, the answer is no. The only way to do that is for them to either talk to each other based on something like the peer connections that can be available via things like peer socket connections or via RTC. The solution that I had up and running as a proof of concept for Frode's reader documents is stateless, in that nothing is actually uploaded to a server. The upside of that meaning that you don't need any specific infrastructure, and all you need on the server side is the matchmaking capability to put those things back and forth between them. The downside is that it is stateless, and there is no retention of those documents per user. If you want to upload documents to a server, then you need to have that scale with the quantity of users and the user data. And that at some level does make things simpler, because you just have a create, read, update, delete CRUD app set up where there's a user account and you can upload all of the data that you want into there. And those are not hard to make. There's the internet, and I don't say that dismissively. The internet is replete with examples of how to do that, but it changes somewhat the sort of the nature and cadence of updates and structure that you need to put together in order to be able to achieve that. So it's definitely an option. It's also possible to do both at once, so that you have the ability to make a real-time upload at the same time as you are doing that. But it really depends on how much infrastructure you're willing to build, and how fast you're wanting those updates to be able to take.
So I want to respond to that and everything else that's been said about this. What I don't want to see us do is pick a direction we're going to go, saying we just want to get moving with this, right? And we want it doesn't matter if it's elegant or not. And then get to a point where we say, oh my God, this is never going to work for a whole lot of people, right? This is not usable in the long run. And have to circle back and start over again and rip out everything we've done. So if the thing we're building, I'm gonna lower my hand. If the thing we're building, lower my hand, can be built upon so that it becomes elegant over time, then that's the answer, right? So the easiest route that can be, we can call it, scope, stay within a scope, yet at the same time we have stretch goals, right? We stretch to the next goal. That makes sense to me.
Yeah, exactly.
I think as a minimum, we agree you want to be able to import your own documents. That is currently done through the library, which from our initial discussion, it seems like that accomplished that. The user just builds a library of their documents, whether by hand or with some software, and imports that. But we can, of course, change that to just load a single document. The code still is in there. That's how we originally did it. So that's not hard. If we want to just have a button that says like view a document, and you can just access your library there, like your internal library, not one of our libraries, conflicting terms. That's fine. That totally makes sense. And then if we want to streamline it later, where it's no longer accessing a document on your machine, it's now accessing a link to a document. How that link was created can be determined individually. If that's uploading to a server and then retrieving it, if that's something that was like already there, that's fine. It could just be like some hash ID or something. That seems expandable to me, and also doesn't break anything if we don't go to the next step.
So
But
based on Dini's wisdom there, sorry if that sounds sarcastic, it isn't. You were writing us. We shouldn't just do something quick and dirty. So let me see if we all agree on the ideal solution. The way I see the ideal solution is someone has a library in some kind of a way on a folder somewhere. They do a simple setup thing once. When they are reading in external software and they want to go XR, ideally, they just click a button, open the headset, and obviously have to be at a certain URL. There it is. Right. It needs to be that simple. Now that we've really highlighted that, it needs to be so that someone who is not super interested in this will actually bother. Making an account means we have to have a server, and that gets messy, right? We did discuss for a while being able to just have a kind of a URL, which is let's say your email address plus a random string or a password or whatever, just so it's not guessable by email. That to me seems great. And also, we have to, yeah, sorry, I could waffle on. Please comment on that, guys.
So there's a hard requirement for some kind of coordination mechanism between two devices. If there's no way to distinguish my traffic from your traffic, then hilarious and strange things happen. So yeah, so there needs to be at least some kind of disambiguation that allows people to elect to say, like, this stream of data from a computer is equivalent to and can be kind of reconciled with the actions on this other computer. It might be possible to achieve that with just a QR code or just sort of a 10 digit string or phrase, and that could be an English language word, such that it's legible. But yeah, that's the minimum level of coordination that's required, and can be done with something that doesn't have any persistent storage, user management, account stuff like that. Yeah.
So Andrew, you're the captain of this ship. What to do now?
I'm less of the captain. I'm more of like one of those guys down at the bottom with the oars. Um, but yeah, I can focus on whatever you guys decide. I share my opinion on different things, but I can really go in any route. I did mention in chat here, for those who didn't see, while an account, we've talked about the account idea before. I think that would be great as a someday thing. It's probably not an immediate need, because the only real use I see for an account would be like sharing or saving your information across sessions on different headsets. And most people don't have different headsets that they're jumping between. They have like a headset they use and then like their computer or something. So as long as you're saving locally on that headset, they won't really have to worry about having an account. Obviously, in an ideal world, you'll have that someday, but I'm just saying probably not necessary for our demo, since it would take a lot of extra backend setup.
Right, but to yeah, I mean, I don't think we should have more discussions on this in the sense of all the different options. We just need to nail something down. We're so many months into this. The requirement is there's a library external. Action from user means library is now on headset. That's it. What's the simplest, most robust, least onerous way for Andrew to implement that?
And
Well,
don't we currently have that? That's what I'm not understanding, because we currently load a library in from like an external file. That seems to be what you're talking about at a base level.
Where is that external file currently?
Wherever you want it to be. It's just accessed somewhere wherever you saved it on your headset, so it's just in storage.
Yeah, but starting externally with an external application, how does an external application, let's say we are doing a demo on Wednesday to someone new from ACM. It's all kinds of exciting, and they have a specific library they want us to use, and they happen to use a Macintosh. What would be the mechanism for that person to specify to a WebXR experience to use that particular library?
So right now it would be you hit like download wherever they have it saved, and you download their library, and then you open up the WebXR and you load the library.
Now, when you say download, you mean in the headset download?
Yeah.
Okay, so that means that Okay, I'm being really dumb, not to pretend to be dumb. I am dumb. They're in the headset. They press the sphere. The bar comes up. This bar says, "You don't have any libraries associated with this environment. What do you want to click a button to find it?" Is that kind of thing you mean?
No, you wouldn't even get inside the XR environment until you choose a library. So there would be some UI just on the browser tab, but you'd have to choose a library before you can even load in. The silver sphere wouldn't be there at the start. That's
Okay,
probably how we
so
would do it.
the
Right now,
silver
it'll just load into nothing, but that's silly.
so the silver sphere wouldn't be there. You go to the URL and it says, "Hey mate, you haven't got a library. Click here to find a library." What kind of thing is entered? It would be a URL or would it be?
No, then it opens up your well, right now this is what it does. Then it opens up your just an Explorer window that shows the files on your headset. You would choose a library and then load it, and then the silver sphere would show up. Right now the silver sphere doesn't toggle, but I did add a notification that tells you when it's fully loaded, so we don't get that issue we had before.
So does
And
that
then you
mean
just go, then you load it.
does that mean then if we're on the Apple Vision Pro, first of all, if I have a library on iCloud that's automatically synced, I can refer to that library?
In theory, yeah. It just needs to access the JSON file, so that could be on a server. It doesn't have to be local.
No, but if it is, well, I'm a Mac guy, so I'm going to have my reader library. So in the headset, I can, when I get to the Safari browser thing, I can navigate to my JSON library on my iCloud, and that'll work, right? So what would be
Yeah,
the
it shouldn't matter where it's saved as long as it is a JSON library.
exactly? But on Quest, what would be the equivalent way that someone would get their stuff onto the Quest headset?
It
Same way.
Yeah, or same way, or just download it from anything. Like there's so many ways people transfer files. We'd essentially right now we're offloading it to the user. Like we trust that you know how to like move files around. Just like make
Mo-
sure you
mo-
have it somewhere.
Moving
But
files, it should feel automatic for the user, of course, right? So with the Quest, being a Mac guy, and that's a different thing, to upload images or 360, I find just not very useful. Um, but okay, so if, Fabian, you have a 3, right? Quest 3. How would you get a library or a JSON file from your computer onto that?
Um, Basic drag and drop to a web dev server.
Yeah, the
So
web dev is useful. Okay, so shall we say, and Dini, this question is primarily for you. Shall we say that then for the beginning, we expect the Quest user to understand how to use a web dev and stuff to get things to the head?
no, well, just drag and drop. The user doesn't care how it's done in the backend. They drag and drop to a web page, and I guess they get as a return the URL with a parameter that points then to the web dev that the client would use, and they open this on the device. So you can even have like a username or like potato 2000, and then it opens the document. The final user shouldn't have to care what the backend does.
Would it be useful if Andrew made a little quick and dirty video demo about this process that we're talking about? Because it seems pretty simple to me, but maybe we should develop one so that it will be on our website so people can see. And it's more
yeah,
concrete.
I'm also not saying that this is the end goal per se. I'm saying this is what currently works. We're not that far off. Like this is how it's working, minus the silver sphere turning on and off. Like you can move the library from wherever you want as long as you're physically transferring the file. I understand, Frode, that you want like in the future to have it done automatically with like reader and whatnot, and that's fabulous, and that would be a great level of polish. Um, but also it's a level of polish that you don't need for the conference. And it's also something that's done externally, not really by the XR software. So I don't know if it's as important as we're making it out to be. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
my
I'd say
device.
to me that what Frode is suggesting is a really great stretch goal, and that's doable. We have another year. If you look at where we're supposed to be right now in the timeline, we're fine. You know, so rather than stress about this, we can say this can be adapted and expanded, extended to do this next thing. But it'd be great to have a little demo so that we could say, here's how you do it. You know, you're wanting to access your ACM paper, you know, here's step 1, here's step 2, here's step 3. Future plans include being able to do this.
So yeah, absolutely. We're on the same page on this. So we do mention the Vision Pro a few times in the Sloan thing. So I don't mind that being the premier initial vehicle. Let me just go through what I think we've agreed. I have my library as a JSON file on iCloud. I put on my Vision Pro, go to this URL. It says, where's your library, buddy? I click a button, navigate the file structure, find the JSON, and I now have my library in the headset. So an additional question that would be, every time I go into XR, can it ping this and see if there's a new version? That's the first thing.
It cannot.
So I would have to do it every time.
What we might be able to do is remember the last used document and auto load that one. So
No.
you would, but no, you can't do that.
No, you can retain the content. You may be able to retain the contents of the from the last session, depending on the time horizon for it. So, local storage allows you to persist data. That's primarily what it's for. Is same
Right.
domain, same device things. But many browsers, Chrome, but also including Safari, reserve the right to flush that data. So it's not a hard persistence. It's something that you get a certain allotment for a certain period of time.
Well,
But if you were within the same week, then you would get everything that you stored there.
So then my question is really practical. Could we have a button that says reload last known document?
No.
So you would have to navigate to it every time.
Yeah, that's not the model of the web. The model of the web is that you're browsing documents and you have the ability to read things and maintain a state, but you can't reach back into the file system. That's not a safe action.
No, but hang on a second. When you browse the web, if there's an HTML file, you get the latest version of it if you reload the page.
Correct. That's the internet. That's not your local file system.
Ah, okay. So what is the minimum action within what I just described, Randall, that we can provide for the user to do this so it's not too faffy?
It would be to have a user account and have all of the server infrastructure set up to be able to manage the updates. I mean, from a user perspective, that is the simplest thing to do. It's just that it's the most onerous on our part.
Does it really mean that when they go to the website, the button that says, where's your library? They can either click a button that's saying, use what you already have, which is cached in WebXR, or they maybe one saying update it. And if you update it, they will have to then go to the home folder and click through to find it, and then click to the .json and open that again.
Yeah.
I know I'm cutting, but this kind of connects really well. I'll be fast. So we're talking about local storage, and you can't save the file itself there, but you can save the file data there. And since it's JSON, why can't we just save the last JSON file that was loaded as a library and auto load that next time? Like, well, I don't understand why that wouldn't work.
You also have the ability to save out from the headset back to the files if you like, so that you can maintain state there. Because the other thing about it is that you're only reading a copy of that file. You're not having a read-write ability with the contents of that file on your iCloud drive or whatever filing system. So in order to be able to persist things back, you would need to be able to flush that to storage, to a more persistent storage than merely local storage. So it's a worthwhile thing to be able to do, but in a sense, if you properly invest in message passing structures, then these are, if not trivial, then achievable. Sorry, I'll stop cutting. Fabian knows the stuff just as well as I do.
Yeah, I'll give the mic to Fabian and Leon, but do we agree that for now, for September, it's totally okay to make the user do this?
Yes.
Right, okay, good. So let's just do that, Andrew. And we can start testing with the basic iCloud. And yeah, fine. I'm glad we've agreed, and do that as quick as you can, obviously.
I'm pretty sure this already works. This is what we have currently working.
Yeah.
You can just load the library in.
If you set up a user interface for that so that I can test it myself, that will be absolutely wonderful.
Yeah, it's there. You just tap the bottom at the bottom left, and you select a document. So if you have it on the headset, you can get it. But it has to be formatted like the library. So that's the caveat there. And so far, the only document that I know of that's formatted that way is my ACM test document, which is on the server.
That's fine. That's
still.
in a way not your job. That's the job of the other developers. Fabian, did I ruin everything for you now? I'm sorry. Okay.
Leon, did you want to say something?
Yeah, Leon, please.
Now we can't hear you.
Yeah, it's funny. I was holding my hand up, but in the meantime, everything I was thinking was already being said. So
Oh.
I will mute myself. Thanks.
I'd like to
Nice.
throw in something here because I'm thinking ahead. I have to write a 6-month report to Sloan, which is coming up in June, right? And so what is it we're going to say? And the thing I've been struggling with, Frode, even with our proposal is what's going to cause someone to go out and buy a headset and use it. And I've been polling people on my campus, polling faculty, staff, students, trying to find out if they have a headset and why they have one. And right now, the anecdotal information I can share is that people that like games have a Quest. I don't know anybody else except me and the rest of you that might have a Apple Vision Pro right now. So the question arises, based on what we said in our grant proposal, is what's going to cause folks like us, our academics, which is our audience, to go out and get involved in virtual reality. And I think the answer comes from the Apple Vision Pro with the spatial computing, where I can actually work with 4 other people in a space and share documents and talk about a document and read a document together and write about that document together. That is the impetus. And I think starting with that idea, and just to finish this thought, Leon, and then I'll turn it over to you. I think I might have mentioned this a long time ago, but years ago, when I was at Texas Women's University in 95, the department started using listservs to disseminate the departmental news, the newsletter stuff, updates on meetings and who got awards and all that stuff. It had been a paper document that would be slipped under our door or put in our mailbox. And that's how we kept up with information. The department decided in the later part of 95 to start putting it out on a listserv. At the time, there were a lot of older folks in the department who did not use the internet, did not use it for email or anything. And so the idea that my chair had was, we'll do this anyway, and this will bring them into the fold. This will force them to have to use the internet. And it did. When they realized that they were missing out on something that was really viable for them, very vital and important, they turned to using at least using email, right? That was considered kosher for them. So I think the same thing could be said about the Apple Vision Pro and the way I can actually tutor 4 students at a time or work with a small group of people, scholars, to actually, right now I'm writing a proposal for the Triangle SCI. It's coming up in 24. Working with Richard Snyder, Andrew, on this would be ideal together in that space. So we have to think about the reasons why folks are going to use headsets. And I think this takes us right back to the notion of what does it mean to share this information, right? I can show what I've got on in my server on my local files, but how are we going to get that out there like a Google Doc where we can both do something to that doc simultaneously? So that's where I'm thinking we're headed with all of this material. Am I off base here? That makes sense to everybody?
I don't think you're
Yeah.
off base, but I think that I don't think you're off base at all. But I think multi-user support will be quite a bit of an extra push.
Well, so there are a couple of ways that multi-user support can work. One is in FaceTime, including, thankfully now, spatial FaceTime. I don't know if you all have tried that together, but it's pretty
Yes.
wonderful.
Wonderful.
I'm afraid I cannot join you. But so that includes using a web page. That web page at present is two-dimensional. It has the ability to have WebGL on it, so that you have that. And that's where Apple is providing the entirety of the infrastructure there for you, in terms of having people being able to relate to these documents and point and things like that. The alternative, like Frode says, is WebXR, which is going to be expensive to coordinate, but will give you all the ability to be in space there. An alternative as well is the construction of models, either in the page, that's not going to be available in Vision OS 1, or but also to be able to generate AR quick look files that you have the ability to sort of stand as sculptural elements in the middle of those spatial FaceTime calls. So I don't know if you've tried sharing Safari. I don't know if you've tried sharing quick look files, but you can do that same thing as well. So if one person is in an experience, either be it in files or whatever else, they can export and look at these files. Those can also constitute part of something that is spatially shared between people, and it's actually rotated and maintained in terms of its relative position to everybody. So that's a pretty cool thing to be able to do as well.
Leon?
You're
Leon,
muted if you're
you're
talking.
muted again.
Right. Yeah, I agree with both your observations. Also, the fear of missing out is a great incentive to to sort of make people curious about something and get out of their comfort zone. I also want to mention two almost invisible reasons, and maybe fear of missing out is also an invisible reason, a third one. But two other ones, which I also personally experienced, is the first one is that a reason to get it is that basically all the um, bad reviews concerning the basics of VR are basically over. So there is no, if you, for example, look at the reviews of the Vision Pro, it's usually nitpicking about really silly issues, while actually the full package is amazing. And the same with the latest Quests as well. And so that was for me and a lot of other people like, okay, this is the right time. Now I'm like, there's no more talk about being nausea or that kind of stuff. And another reason is also an invisible one, which is fast publishing. I know a lot of friends and other people who have always been interested in VR, but they were not particularly interested in playing with VR through the app stores. So developing, submitting an app, and like, it's way too complicated for them to try something out. And since these new these new VR headsets support WebXR, including the latest Quests, the Vision Pro, like, this is really like a perfect timing to go for fast publishing. And this fast publishing also maybe connects again with Dini's mentioning of, like, if everybody can publish very fast to each other's, then that's a great reason to jump in on the fun.
Yeah, Fabian.
Yeah, it's to quickly go back on the networking aspect. I'll be a little bit egoist and egocentric there. What gets me going with discussions here and prototyping more generally, and to be a little bit pompous, is to dare go where nobody has gone before. Might be a mistake, might not be. And I imagine, I would hope at least that people in research are are smart enough to say, okay, this works this way, that's been the usual way. That new part, though I don't know, I want to try this. So basically that because resources are limited, the crazier stuff we can try, and the stuff like drag and dropping a file, well, we forget because we and other people get it already.
Yeah, so many interesting thing here. As I've asked in the chat, we can't do share play in XR, can we?
No.
So when it comes to sharing the native apps, we can use that. And that is something we're doing. Dini and I already had a brief session where we looked at a PDF together in Reader, which showed all kinds of interesting issues. Google Doc would work in a shared space if it was on Safari, absolutely. But in terms of what we are developing here, because we are in a full immersive environment, I don't think we can do multi-user yet. I think we should aim for that because it's clearly useful, but I don't think that should be something we should work on before September. I really think we should do the first use case, which is preparing to write an academic document as a single person. And now that Andrew has pointed out that I'm legally blind, I didn't notice the button on our webpage. I think we've come really far just by having that. Thank you for that. Now, any more issues on this? I'm very, very happy with where we've gotten. Actually, before, yes, Dini, and then another thing, and then Brandel will take, excuse me, Fabian will take over.
We have 2 years. Frode wrote me this morning a little bit like, we got to get this done. I said, calm down. Look at the timeline. We're way ahead of the timeline. We got another year and a half. We're only year and a half, not even more than a year and a half. We're now in month 4, month 5. Yeah, we're barely in month 5 yet. And month 5 is a week away.
We do, but we still, until I've been able to write from Reader a JSON that Andrew's system will accept, we haven't been able to upload the user's library yet. So that's going to have to be a real priority. So I'm very glad at what we got today. Now,
Well, let me just respond to that. So writing is in year 2, but as I wrote in the case studies, writing is not separate from reading. So some ability to write, but we don't have to really have anything for writing until year 2.
yeah, absolutely. That's absolutely the way it is. But what I'm saying is multi-user support, of course, will be later as we go on, but also writing, yes, but just to have the user's own documents isn't working yet. And what, Andrew, I know you're there working away in the background, but I guess I should get my guys to look at your JSON again, see if they can write a compatible JSON, and then we have the beginning of a library that can be uploaded. So that's very, very good.
Yeah, we do have some of the older prototypes. I've since removed it when we added the library, but the older prototypes have another button that loads an individual document. So you can still load your individual documents. It's just the library is now the better version, so that's replaced it.
Oh, okay. Can you please, along to the right of upload library, have a button that says upload documents?
Do you want to allow that? Like
At least,
bypass the library? We could if you'd like.
okay, let's not do that now. That's fine. Let's keep going on this. I just wanted to say, now that Brandel is here as well, the PDF that I sent in an email and put on Slack of the summary of the meetings, please have a look at it. I used Claude AI, which I found is absolutely freaking amazing because you can set many, many prompts in one go. So when you look at each meeting, all of those things, names, what do people disagree on and agree on, all of that is done in one single prompt. It's crazy. So what I'd really like to know from you guys, number one, is this useful rather than having a very, very long transcript? And should we tweak the prompt to ask different questions? And if you do think it's useful, what I plan to do is make a new document of this after every meeting when I've done this, so you can have a look at your own stuff and just see if there's anything egregiously wrong, and then I'll just fix it. I think it comes close to what we've been talking about for years of having really, really useful summaries. It happens to be in PDF, but because I'm doing it in Author, I can also export to HTML if anybody wants to do exciting views to it, of course. I personally find it amazing. It shows things like there was disagreement on this issue. The team seems to have learned this. It's like, for real. What? Anyway. All right. Any other things before Fabienne goes crazy? Okay, I guess Dini is back in a second.
If you haven't played with the generation of USD files, it's genuinely fun. The process where a web page has the ability to put those things in space, like my birthday cake and my books and things like that. It's really neat because you can build stuff and then see it and then pass it around as part of a workflow.
Well, you put your foot in it now because this comes into the issue of being able to have an expandable document. So USD obviously relates to that. Once we've gone through a few times the workflow of being able to upload the library, we really need to discuss how we want the HTML versions of the documents to be rendered, of course. And that comes into three-dimensional stuff like you're talking about, Randall. It would just be absolutely amazing to have that initially encoded in the visual meta. So when you open the document, it does the USD thing right there natively. Yeah, it's super cool. Yeah, okay. Fabienne, over to you.
So I'll try the usual. So sharing my screen might not work. So just keep me posted if there is an issue. Let me know if you see anything. Still nothing?
Not yet.
Okay.
We see a screen that says Quest 3.
Okay, then you see
It's
something.
empty. It's black right now.
Okay, and you see me in the quest now with my hands moving?
I see you in the window of our, talking heads, but not in that screen that you're trying to present. It's not feeding into the system. There we go. That worked. Whatever you just did. It went away. That's it. That's it.
So you're gonna try? Do you see anything?
It went away. You had it and then it went away.
Black screen with you are sharing your entire screen. Stop sharing.
Yeah, but
There
I
we
think it's flickering, isn't it? No? Okay,
Yeah,
it's fine.
yeah.
I'll show some little recordings I had before, not live, but you'll get the idea just the same. The first one, I don't remember if I showed you this. I showed some of you, but basically the idea is that, of course, post-it notes you get. But there are two kinds of post-it notes, the blue one with codes and the yellow one without, just text, the usual ones. I use post-it notes because that's what people are used to. And the color means though that they behave differently. So if you see what happens there is the yellow one is pushed away because it's not code, so it's not friendly with code, and code snap next to each other. The idea behind this is that, and I discussed also a little bit with Leon about this, is that I think manipulating things with the idea of a grammar on how an object, just like grammar in linguistic, you can have different types of tokens or words in a sentence, like verb versus adjective versus noun, etc. And they have a certain type and thus behavior. And you cannot to have some certain rules that makes you cannot make a certain sentence in English that nobody would then understand. Well, I think it applies to pretty much any domain of knowledge, like chemistry, like programming. And I think if you can make that grammar, I don't want to say tangible, but at least manipulable, or see the result of it, I think that helps a lot. So some of you know I'm quite a fan of Scratch and how you can have blocks that have a shape and then you program moving those blocks around. I'm now quite intimately convinced that most domain of knowledge would benefit from being represented like this, like a grammar, tokens and rules, or entities and rules, for learning at the very least. For manipulating, I'm not sure, but at least to learn. So I generalized this a little bit more with those cubes. And now what they do, they snap next to each other and they stack. So when you put on the top of another cube, it's going to move next to the furthest away where it can avoid overlapping each other. I won't show the code, but what I liked about it is it's actually quite simple, like maybe 5 lines of code. It's not like a complex things to do. But I think in terms of possibility, again, manipulating objects in space, here they're just cubes, but you can imagine manipulating entity of different domain of knowledge. And they have their own set of rules, namely that they don't snap to post-it notes, and the post-it note don't snap on the cubes. And then I started to, this I did not finish yet, but move on the
Can you
like
show us
3DS.
There's too much intro. I'm getting really, really lost. Can you show us and then maybe repeat what you're saying?
I'm showing you just this. I'm not going to show from the headset.
We're not. You're not
Okay.
sharing anything, Fabian.
Okay.
I
Shit.
thought you were previewing what you're going to show.
No, okay. So I tried to show from the headset point of view, and I don't know if it's the networking, but it's black most of the time. Okay, well, yeah, I really love sharing screen on this Zoom. So, do you see? Do you see my screen?
Mhm.
Yes.
Yes, thank you.
I think that's a bit better, I hope now. So you see the post-it notes then.
That's nice. Thank you for that.
And you see the yellow one doesn't snap to the blue one, it snaps away from it. So it's kind of funny that I explain all this without the visual, because my whole point is being able to see those abstract concepts like a grammar with entities and rules, and being able to manipulate it is what makes it understandable. Of course, if you're already familiar with those kind of concepts I mentioned, maybe you understood despite my poor explanation, but maybe not. And I think now that you see it, at least I hope, and even more if you were to jump in the headset and move those things around, being post-it notes or whatever, I hope you would get it and you get a literal sense of it a lot more. Now, like I was saying, the same, but with 3D objects, like post-it notes or 3D objects, but a bit less exciting, the cubes. And like I was saying, they stack next to each other, not on top of each other. And if you put one next to one that already is there, is going to snap at the bottom, let's say, of that stack. And they are not, they don't interact with the post-it notes. So the idea also is that you can have different entities or objects that have their own grammars, and they don't have to apply to everything in that space. Does it make more sense now with the visual?
Yes. And I love the
Thank you.
idea of how you express the cognition part of it, right?
Thanks.
Nicely
And I
done.
think actually the thing I did not show yet visually and manipulably is I think those are those rules between when you basically release an object and where it goes. Those rules themselves now they're just code, and again simple one takes a couple of lines, but those lines of code should be arrows or blocks or lines or something that you can grab so that you can design or modify the grammar. So how the different entities relate to each other and behaves when they do a thing, like when you release them, for example. But that's just theoretical or an idea. A couple of days ago, I did not implement that yet. But I'm quite convinced manipulating the grammar itself helps. Also, one of the motivation behind it is, I don't know if some of you learned basic arithmetics as a kid with this, but I learned with those cubes, build a bit of wood when I was a kid. And then when you put 10 together, you can exchange with the teacher or a kid, another kid, the line. And then when you have 10 lines, you have those plates. And when you have 10 plates, you have a big cube with 1,000 tiny cubes in it, which as a young kid, 1,000 is a big number. But being able to manipulate them, giving an affordance to those abstract concepts really helped me. Like, I don't remember if it really helped me understand, but I have fond memory of such things. So that's a little bit the hope there to be able to do the same thing, but to generalize it, to have more entities with more grammars, and that the rules here, for example, 10 become a line, and then you can't break it without an action, I think is, yeah, I'm going to explore that more. And yes, the 3GS arrows for the grid that you see at the bottom, and the arrows there for more fine motor skills. Like if you need to snap, for example, you want to see where you snap to with a grid. And just yesterday or this morning, being able to either potentially snap on the corners, and you specify which corner you want to snap, or edit the entity itself while in VR. So basically editing the content in VR, not outside of it. And I think that's about it. There are a couple of things that I would want to show you today, but it doesn't work, which is basically those new couple of commands where I can attach to self. So if I were to rotate the camera, everything will rotate relative to me. And when I release, it would go back there. So a little bit like mentioned earlier about having the main screen in front of us and then entities or post-it notes, etc., that move, but only for a short amount of time, and then back to the main thing being reading, for example, in the headset. Voilà.
Yeah, that was phenomenal. Sorry, I'm on YouTube here finding a Ted Nelson video. No, you okay, fine. It was nice to see it up there. It's really amazing, and I look forward to being able to go in and out of your space from these other spaces. I could imagine a few obvious use cases where you have an author represented as a shape, and each side can mean something. So you have one side of, this is what the author has written. The other side is who has cited this author's paper, like an obvious thing there. I think that once we build the obvious ones, because as a design principle, I don't think we should be afraid of the obvious. That's what I tell my students anyway. If something is obvious, do it. It might be brilliant. It might be silly, but you've done it, so now you can free your brain to go to the next, right? So if we were to build some obvious grammars in here, at least conceptually, just us writing documents, I could imagine getting to a point of not only having scientific experiments embedded as three-dimensional blocks in a paper, which will be insane, but the paper itself will have many elements. One thing we talked about a long time ago, which is what Vidsurf calls computational text. And a simple version of that would be, next Wednesday I plan to blah blah. And then Wednesday happens, it'll say, next Wednesday I planned to blah blah. So it changes conceptually, right? These are very, contextual is what I'm trying to say. But to really have the mind space, I think in June, that's a very important thing. In June, as you know, I'm hosting a Future Tech Social. No presentations, none of that. We're just going to spend the weekend chatting. And for those who can't be here, we will try to have a Zoom on at all times. But I can imagine that sitting around the fireplace at 2 o'clock in the morning will be the time when we can develop for this type of environment. What you're presenting here, Fabian, is so real and exciting. I would say that you were talking about Scratch earlier. You're talking about Alan Kay's Scratch, right? One of the versions of.
I don't remember. To me, at least, I associate with the MIT kindergarten and
Squeak and Scratch and what's it's probably it is. Thank you, Brandel, for coming up for that. What you're doing here is that in not 3D, but any D you want. And sorry for taking so long talking, but I'll explain why I think this is so exciting. First time I met Vint Cerf was actually for breakfast. There was an interview for the Doug Engelbart thing we were doing. And, he was being very humble. I said, Vint, what you've invented is not a highway, super highway like they talked about in America a long time ago. You've invented a means through which anybody can make a highway anytime they need it. That's incredible. So what you've done here, Fabian, I see that because these are not three-dimensional objects only, they're computational objects. So you have now developed the infrastructure through which we can build as many dimensional structures as we want. So I just think that it's going to take a huge amount of time for us to experiment and figure out where this can go. Over, Leon, please take over.
Thank you. Yeah, I just want to take this opportunity to say to Fabian that this is really mind-blowing. I really like this, and yeah, it's worth an applause. The term symbolic manipulation, and then in 3D is, I think we've talked about it many times, and it's really impressive to sort of see it in front of us. What I was also thinking is that, because I really, of course, I'm a proponent of URLs and URIs, that I would really love to be able to basically add some metadata to a building block and basically attach an URL to there. Another thing, why this is blowing my mind is that we've been talking about building a virtual library many times, and we have noticed that, for many people, this means something else. And with the library also comes many people have different ideas of how the workflow of that virtual library should be, basically the grammar. And for example, I was really amazed when I heard Dini talk about her workflow, and especially this was completely new for me. And it's something I'm completely not used to. Basically, this is also a certain grammar, and I was thinking that if you continue with this work and you keep things very generic, so that people can sort of build or create their own grammars, then yeah, it almost reminds me a bit of the beginning of Roblox, which is more like a children's virtual library with not much rules, but they create their own rules by interacting with the environment, just by building simple objects out of these blocks. Like there is no, the creators of the environment had no sort of specific rules of what you should do in that environment. They just had a certain grammar for how you can build things. And this really gives me the same kind of vibes, that if you don't sort of opinionate this into a certain Trello kind of application, but keep it really flexible, like fluid grammar, you can decide for yourself how things should interact with each other. I think that could be a really powerful starting point. Yeah.
I threw in here in the chat that we need a shared grammar, else we communicate with no one but ourselves. And that goes back to Frode's concept of reading and writing that was in that document he shared. I forgot where it went, but reading references, that document that I read over the week, this morning or over the weekend, But the idea is that if I have my own grammar and you have your own grammar and you have your own grammar, then it's really hard for us to put a sentence together that we can understand, right? And so there is personal, I think we all recognize there's personal language, there's family language, there's community language, and I would say even cosmic language, right? I think of this concept of ego, oikos, polis, and cosmos. And we're moving always, traversing among these four entities. And so the thing about being married is that you have your own family, words, things that are triggers, things that you can say and no one else in the room understands. And then you get out to another place, outside your home, and there's a language that's there that you have to be part of in order to communicate. So I think that's the thing to think about is as we're building these personal libraries and then thinking about sharing these personal libraries, sharing with one or two people in our field, but then sharing in a larger community, that's a different way of thinking about reading and writing.
So one of the people who've been to the future of text is David Bellows, who wrote "Is That a Fish in Your Ear?" Reference to Douglas Adams, and it's exactly what you're saying, Deanie. He points out that even within a family, people will use language slightly differently. And before you had countries, the language would change as you kept moving. So that's really, really important. Now, this little button that I have on the iPhone on top here, when I was in, by the way, how cool is that screensaver background thing? So cool. Right, anyway, when we were in China, we would use that a lot. I would speak a phrase, they would translate it, and it would be Chinese. So translation, even within this, may become necessary. But I do strongly agree with Deanie that to strive for a common grammar, to strive for that is really, really important. But still, we may need some kind of translations at some points.
And I think about the visual language, and we talk a lot about that in the lab as we're building interactive spaces with UX UI, like where should a button go? What does this button look like as opposed to this button? And, trying to come up with some consistency so that users can know how to traverse a document, a series of documents. And in the sense of this project, the consistency of design throughout. And so this goes back once again to what you're showing with the building blocks of grammar and recognizing that all the things that are red represent this. I think the genius of Apple was actually giving us that visual language in a computer environment that has transcended the computer environment.
That's what Guy Kawasaki keeps saying, absolutely. Absolutely. So the first thing we're going to start doing now is test. Okay, I'm just for a moment backtracking a little bit. So Andrew said he had upload document in addition to upload library for a while. I'm beginning to think we should reinstate the upload document as well, at least for testing, so that if we have a well-formed HTML from ACM, we should be able to just pick one and have it go into the system when we start designing what it will look like. Once we start doing that, then we can decide how to section it, how to cut it. And that then may very well relate to what Fabienne is doing. If we can, for the sake of argument, I'm now picturing this as kind of robots or proteins in our body where this thing comes in and you have, so this HTML thing comes in and there are known sections. Here's a section called references. So there is a thing waiting for it. Said, your references. I'm going to eat you up, and I'm going to process you in a specific way so that you are computationally able to be in a 3D environment. So that might mean that it, like Ted Nelson's zigzag in zigzag more than Xanadu, you can choose to have this rendered and viewed in very different ways. To see the connections and relationships and so on. Yeah, Leon.
So when you were just mentioning that, I was thinking that like in contrast to Scratch, a programming language, you could also, in this situation, you could even also grab something and put it into a box, which would basically mean this is going to be processed in a certain way. Let's say the reference box or the index box, make this an index item. And without any programming, it's just a symbol, like a box, and the grabbing and putting it into a box, it can just be a symbol for a very technical operation. I think this can remove a lot of obstacles, which are usually. So, for example, with Scratch, I do think it's a bit text heavy, perhaps. Like you really need to sort of it's still a bit like programming, but I think because of these new affordances in VR, it could be even this barrier could be even lower. So yeah, it's not really a question, but this is my view.
It's very exciting to, realities are exciting, like sitting on a very long flight with a headset, having to use it. Part of it, I was using it with no trackpad. And I'm sorry, for knowledge work, you got to have a mouse or a trackpad. The whole vision thing and pinching is absolutely ridiculous, which is a useful thing to find out. So with what you presented here, Fabian, the potential is insane. And I agree very much with Leon that we should try to, there you go, taking ownership of working with you already, having it as open as possible. So for instance, you can do these kinds of transformations and allow people to add the code of how these should work and what the grammar should be, even if they do require programming. Because the kind of thing that I can absolutely see, and we've talked about, I think, but this kind of enables is you open up a new document, and I'll do the quote marks for document, whatever the heck that will be in a few years. You don't just open it up plain, you open it up with many, many different aspects of it analyzed for you. One of the things you want to know is a basic search of has it been redacted, not redacted, retracted. That's a simple thing, but you may very well quickly want to know the key concepts and the author. How does it fit in what your colleagues are talking about at the moment? And these are the types of things that can really benefit from the active dimensionality that you're giving it. You can almost imagine, again, proteins in the body or a washing line of elements of these things hanging out and see how they relate. Maybe we should think of knowledge as being protein folding problems now. That can be fun.
So to go a bit on that, one of the things I've learned as a kid was a model of knowledge where you have different basically layers, where you have roughly physics at the bottom, chemistry on top, biology on top, and then eventually sociology, politics, etc., etc. I think a model from the 60s or 70s. It helped me basically to put different parts of knowledge in sections and how they might relate to each other also. And yes, the example that you mentioned, Frode, for example, are things that I had in mind specifically. And one of the classic AR demo that I guess most of us have tried here is like you take different molecules, and when you release them close to each other, they snap, and when it's like H2O, you have like a water bottle that appears or something like this. I think it's a pretty typical. If you did not have that, don't try. I think it's interesting, and I think it's fun. There are even a couple of games like this when you forgot the name, but when you drop, you can build a civilization from rocks. You start from rocks, and then you have more and more complex structures. And that's kind of the point. There is like you have different grammars, all the different layers of, or most of the different layers of knowledge are represented this way with different atoms or tokens or whatever, and how they relate to each other. So the goal is indeed to say, hey, let's play with actual symbols of what's an atom or chemistry, etc. And I think that what I find exciting, let's say, with this kind of perspective is it seems to match surely not all, but at least most domains of knowledge. So I think in terms of exploration, I would say it's potentially quite fruitful. And to go back to be a bit more pragmatic, is if it is and align with exploration related to Sloan, it's like you take a PDF of a published article, and then you can try to see which of such items we can represent. Let's say starting with chemistry, because that's the one that's most obvious, but others too. I think that could be a bit also like Brendel has been putting some prototype or papers in VR. It's not just the paper itself, is like within a context and eventually with some tools to explore it. So I think that's to me, that would be proper augmentation and thus properly exciting.
Absolutely. So, Dini, putting you on the spot, could you imagine authoring a paper based on these kinds of blocks if the way you told the blocks what to be was something that you and I could deal with and we wouldn't have to be programmers?
I don't know if I could write that way, but I think that way. I mean, the way you think, I mean, you don't know how your brain is working cognitively as you're putting ideas together, but I imagine it's building blocks like that. But to express my ideas and to put it on paper, words are the outcome of that conceptualization. Sentence structure, phrases, grammar are all expressed through words. Does that make sense?
It does, and it makes me think of what Mark Anderson said when I started doing the map in author a few years ago. And he said that it looks like it can be very useful at the start of a project and maybe at the end of a project, but maybe not so much during. So when you say you think that way, you may not author that way. I think that makes a lot of sense.
Well, reading and writing are cognitive processes, and it's not something that is natural. I mean, from what I've read about reading theory, it's not natural to us. It's something that we can do and have taught ourselves to do. I mean, if you have a child that's never been taught to read, they don't read. You have to sustain that reading experience with them.
Yeah.
And so, it is something that's outside of the norm for the human brain, although we have the capacity for it.
What I found, yeah, the question of what reading is, though, is of course also a very interesting question, and many aspects of it. And we talked about grammar a lot. Grammar is, of course, key to reading, key to text, because without grammar, you can do one thing at a time, basically.
Can I say something about grammar that's interesting? And Rob, and those of you that speak many languages know that the grammar kind of defines the cultural concepts. When I was studying Greek, it was so fascinating to me that you could have the verb first, and the verb contains the subject, right? The subject was not separate unless you made it separate. So the action and the agent were connected. Whereas in English, we have she baked a cake. Baking is separate from the person who does the action. And the concept of pulling those two concepts together says a lot about the ancient Greek culture, the way language developed for them. Thinking about word order in French, a dress and then the color, as opposed to red dress. So the emphasis on the object as opposed to its description. And it's just fascinating to me. So the grammar is a construct, and it's one we can learn, and there's different constructs. And if you train your brain to think about the different constructs, you can grasp different grammars. But most Americans do not know another language, so they only have one construct. And even then, they don't do well with it.
In Kevin Kelly's Out of Control, which I hope you've read, it's quite brilliant, old now, anyway, he has this little anecdote of a professor dropping a pencil on a table. And he's saying the problem with Western thinking is that we believe the pencil is more real than its motion. So when you talk
or the table.
well, really the motion and the interaction being the thing that matters, like how in Asian grammars and language, it tends to be more about the relationship rather than the things. So the way this is encoded in grammar, Dini, is absolutely important and different and worth not ignoring. Yeah, anyway,
It's
wonderful stuff.
similar. Bill Buxton says, "Why is Canada like a state transition diagram?" And they're both unduly influenced by the states.
That's funny. That's quite funny. I tried, by the way, for a
I
little.
won't be saying that when I will not repeat that in Montreal tomorrow. That would not make me popular.
I tried to, for the little graphic sphere, one of the, for our logo for the events, I tried to do a reflection of a globe in there. And it always defaults to North America. And I thought, that's fine. We're going to be in Seattle, Washington. So, excuse me, Vancouver, Washington. So I tried to tell it, to prompt it, to highlight that, to center that on the map. It just wouldn't. Just goes to the standard America as the world. So that's the training data that's been given. Yeah.
But yeah, his point is that transitions in a state transition diagram are as meaningful as the states themselves. That the idea, like you say, of the motion of the pencil, the actions that are taken by the objects are significant. And that's a really useful lens to be able to apply and recognize the work to unwind in our default views.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. So, right. So, Dini, how many days are you going to north of the border for?
I leave tomorrow at 6 in the morning and I'll be back Saturday afternoon.
Okay. So that
I won't be
means,
here on Wednesday at all.
right, you won't be.
Mm-mm.
Yeah, no, that's
Big
fine.
conference.
I hope that this Wednesday will be very production focused to get these things we discussed working. So that should be simple. Also, there's been a little bit of random discussion, primarily because of Adam, to try to have a more European day time-wise, because he's got a couple of hundred kids, it seems. So for him to have time between 4 and 6, no, sorry, for him it's 5 and 7 in the evening. It's just not really feasible. So if we can try to do something earlier, where obviously everybody's invited, but it may be a bit harder to attend, we should think about that.
What time would that be? Because Andrew's, we're on West Coast time, as is Rob and Brandel. So what time are you suggesting?
I think.
And also, I just want to go on record saying that Andrew is putting in, 2 hours a week, 4 hours a week right now on meetings. He's working behind the scenes while we're talking right now, but when you call on him, he stops working to talk.
Oh my God.
And I don't want to eat up too many of his hours with meetings.
No, of course not. No, these meetings are more, I see Adam's contribution when he's able to join us again twofold. One, he's got quite deep technical knowledge, like some of you guys here, to help Andrew really optimize things and get things together. But I see mostly the contribution of doing just another weird thing, so that we end up with lots of little prototypes. So it would be mostly kind of a design day, a visual design day. We just mess around with things. But it would probably be, quite early in the morning for you guys.
Well, Andrew, I don't want to, 8 o'clock in the morning is kind of early for us anyway. So let's you and I talk about times off this set, but I'm not going to be communicating with anybody starting tonight, like at 10 o'clock. So whatever we decide to do, we probably ought to do it tonight, because I'm not going to be available. This conference is very, I'm very involved. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah. Well, I don't think we're going to do anything this week, so it's not super urgent, but we'll have to see what Adam also, what works for him, and just try to do different things. Because having relatively different topics, like today was supposed to be general, but it was very much about implementation, which I think is, I personally like at the moment. We need to do that. But to also have more design days, and also, Dini, you had one book club. I thought that was a really good idea. I wasn't there, obviously, but I did read as much of that as I could. And it's a very, very different dimension to this. It's not just implement. I mean, half of what I read of Benedict was annoying, half of it was brilliant, and that's the way it should be, right?
Why was it annoying? I'm sorry. Why was it annoying?
Because a lot of it is pure philosophizing about spaces that at the time didn't exist. So now it's quite different. It's like, hang on. But then it can get a little navel-gazy, but that is philosophy. And that's fine. But sometimes it can get a bit, okay, the reality is a bit different. We don't all have to agree with everyone's perspective all the time to be inspired by it. And I do think we should invite him to be part of our work, obviously. I think Dini's a bit shocked.
Well, I mean, you and I are both academics. I mean, we do theory, we do philosophy. That's part of what we learn in academia, right? So I don't eschew it. I actually embrace it. So I find it interesting to see what people said this space was going to be like. And then thinking about, what did they predict? And then that means we can look at what's happening today and potentially make predictions for the future. And this is one of the things about the lab that I think is interesting. Students come in and see the Macintoshes arranged in chronological order from 77 onward, right? And the question I leave them with when they see the 2006, 2010 flat screens is, okay, what's next?
Yeah, no,
What's next?
exactly. That's the whole point. It is well worth it, which is why I think it would be great if we could have a slot for it on a more regular basis. I'm just saying, reading it, some of it can be inspirational, some of it is annoying, and I think that's good. It's provocative. It's the whole point. It's not just treading down what we think. So I wasn't in any way saying it. Yeah, that's why I brought it up. It's a good thing to do. So we have not too much time left, winding up today. I would say we made progress today. I'm going to produce an AI summary of this meeting as well. See if you agree with what it says. And also, Randall, particularly for you, considering the kind of prototypes you developed before we really got into this. If you want the summaries in a different format so you can play around with them, of course, that would be fun.
Thank you. Yeah.
I'm resisting the urge to share some of the ideas of prototype I have during the meeting so that I don't feel too much pressure to actually make it happen. But I'll just take the occasion to thank everyone for the conversation.
Yeah, and thank you for that construction of the block-based system. It's really interesting. I really like the idea of being able to kind of combine and separate. That's something that I've been playing with. I finally finished Too Much to Know, the book at Mark Anderson's recommendation, and just trying to think about what we might be able to do to a corpus of text in terms of the active manipulation of it, pulling it apart, and kind of turning different components of it into references for themselves. I was also on a group chat with Andy Matushik about doing that. He sent a picture of some set of note cards that he had arranged on his table, and made a suggestion to him that he set up a thermal printer attached to an iPhone app to be able to print out SF symbols onto post-it notes so that they can be big, bold kind of reference to their concepts rather than having to kind of draw them himself. And yeah, I think that there's a lot about level of detail and level of granularity where you can reconcile coarse actions with fine ones within a digitally mediated environment that I'm really excited by. There's also over Rob at Dana Staff's house yesterday, and she was showing me not even a galley, but a paper book where she's assembling a children's book that I believe is greenlit, and she's trying very much to be allowed to do her own illustrations, and and has all of these sort of components glued together or taped together. But really remarkable to think about the way like each of those sections has a life of their own. And one of the things I was telling her about is the fact that diagrams and illustrations all have to live together. They live throughout a book, but they also need to have symmetry and balance in terms of what level of detail you have to the thing on page 10 versus the one on page 25. So drawing illustrations for an entire book is not just a matter of drawing pictures, but making sure they hold together. Like people fall short of that, but yeah, having the ability to have a view specs of looking at just the pictures, just the asides to make sure that the language is all correct. It's a remarkably important thing to be able to do, which is related to writing at a greater scale than merely working on a specific paragraph. But that was a really interesting thing to see because we've been friends with the staff for 10 years now, and so she's seen and humored my sort of my gesticulations about spatial information for the better part of a decade. But now I think it's starting to make sense to her now that she's sort of composing and compiling documents at this scale on her own terms. And so yeah, I hope we get somewhere with it.
Can I mention something there? When I was working in the motion tracking lab that I had, I was building a environment where you can put together poetry while you're moving or dancing through the space, right? And you're holding this tracker in your hand, and the infrared light is, hitting it, and you're able to evoke things, right? So I was developing grammar in that space. Like, where do you put the verbs? Where do you put the nouns? Where do you put the adjectives? So that they're intuitive. So somebody that's just, you hand someone in the audience a tracker and say, make a poem. Where would they naturally go to find a verb? Right. In American language, in English language, right? And so I had this whole map where I mapped out, I think it was 32 words across this space in a three-dimensional way, so that all the verbs were located in one strata, and the nouns the other, so that you can actually move fluidly through this space and make entire sentences. And so that reminds me a lot of what you showed, Leon, in terms of the blocks, the concept blocks, because I could take that entire map and concept block it just like you did. And I did color code the map. So there is a correlation else. I'll dig that out of my archives and send it to you. It might be interesting for you to see it.
Yes.
So that brings up a question I think we've answered, but I think it's, Fabian, please go, sorry.
I'll go super quick. One thing also, Breno, at some point you mentioned, I'm not sure that's a word, but like the referenceability, or the ability to go from one concept and point to another, basically. And one thing I did just before leaving or engineering school was start to note my ideas, and I start with a plain file and just like ID after another, and then rather quickly I had an idea that referenced to the previous one or one before this, and I started to have line numbers, and then the ideas that to be numbered. And as soon as I started to give the ability to reference another idea, I think it exploded in terms of quantity for sure. Quality, I would say so, just based on the new number of ideas that we're able to reference from each other. So I think it's a extremely important and precious concept to be able to refer to each other. One thing also that led me to this, and it's to play with those entities and grammars so that they led to each other, is this. So I made a stool, but what's interesting is I did the terrible welding behind it. So I went to a workshop just 5 minutes by bike here, and it's a big thing. It's heavy. I can stand on it. It's mostly for my feet, so I can rest while watching Three Body Problem and whatever else on my computer. But it's the thing I've made, so I'm proud of it, regardless of how imperfect it is. Why do I mention it though? Is because during the workshop, the first part of the workshop was how to cut different pieces together and the theory behind it. And honestly, I was not excited. I'll put it this way. The second part of the workshop, a couple of weeks after, was just welding two pieces together. And as soon as I did this, like the third step was, wow, shit, I can do those two together, but I can put also those two together, and those and those and those. As soon as you can compose from those basic building blocks, like your mind starts running, and it's super empowering. And of course, what I haven't done there yet in XR is design the pieces that will weld together, so that you stretch the tube, you put them together, and there is also a certain grammar. You cannot put certain tube a certain way, you cannot weld a certain way, because physically speaking, it's not going to hold. So I think, yeah, that was inspired by this very pragmatic event, but I think the loop to go back from thinking about those grammars, but also designing the tools to make more such physical things, yeah, super exciting. And I have to run. Very sorry for this, but I gotta go. Take care. Thanks
Oh, no,
again,
I've got to go
everyone.
too. I've got to go to the other lab. So bye, everybody.
Yeah, I have to drop too. Have a great time. See you on Wednesday.
Bye, guys. And for those of us who remain, just really briefly, we are now going to be working on, well, yeah, they've gone. I was thinking maybe Andrew would be here, because I'm wondering if it's libraries, articles, and so on. Anyway, it looks like we're making some progress. What do you guys think, Rob and Brendel?
Yeah, I'm excited. I mean, I think the there are still really big conceptual gaps in the public consciousness about what XR, about what spatial computing can do to information processing. But I think that this is a really fantastic beachhead into making it clear that there are ways of doing information, of reading and navigating and manipulating that are more than just sort of a fancy tech demo, and having it informed by the past of text and hypertext, and people who are familiar with the idea of information in an academic context, rather than just, you know, visual designers or advertising people, is going to be really valuable for setting up a basis to reason about the actual merits for people doing real work with this stuff. So yeah, very grateful.
Yeah, I'm feeling the weight of the reality of what's at stake here quite severely, which is good and bad, but also thinking back to the Macintosh. And this is why I want Adam to join us again. He's been busy, so we have to bend over backwards, because we need a few of you guys who are technically brilliant. You know, look at, you know, I grew up dreaming about the Mac. The Mac to me changed my world, because if it was a PC, I wouldn't be in this industry. The elegance of the Mac to me was amazing. And as you know, I see the Vision Pro as being a new Macintosh, and we have to develop for it to show. And how did they you know, the joke goes, no one signed the inside of the Vision, they signed the inside of the Macintosh, right? And it makes me think of Andy Capps and all these people that we saw, the three of us, on the 40th anniversary. It's amazing. We need those people in our group. You know, we need to do what needs to be done for them to be happy. Because, you know, Andrew's great, but, you know, he's young, he's got a specific perspective. Someone like Fabian, as we saw today, and Adam, they do very different stuff, and we have to invest in that. So I think we're doing the right thing, and yeah, it's good. And I hope you can both consider coming over here in June for Future Tech Social Weekend. I know it's not likely, but if you can, it would be excellent. Of course, the space for
Which
you.
weekend?
We haven't decided yet. I think Fabian said, let me just see his texts. I think he just said anything but the last weekend. Not the last weekend, otherwise should be fine, yeah.
I return from France on the 12th of June, so
Okay, so we'll try to make it early.
before that, a channel up might.
Good. All right, excellent. Okay, well, thank you guys. And yeah, Wednesday is just 2 days away. Bye for now.